What's up guys, Qehzy or Noah here, bringing you guys another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create this 3D poster in Cinema 4D and Photoshop. So obviously you can see this is a GFuel poster that includes spinning liquid, and it's very bright, colorful, and I think it looks really nice. I posted on Twitter as a test render and people liked it, and I went through creating a poster, and judging from the feedback on it, it seems like you guys definitely want a tutorial, so here it is. Before we get started, there are a few things you need to download or check out, especially if you want to follow along exactly. So first things first, I used a GPU renderer called Corona to actually render this out. Now Corona isn't free, but you can actually get it for 45 days free, as you can see here, unlimited demo. So you have those 45 days to check it out and use it. There's also Octane that you can get for $20 a month. I was just testing out Corona here, and that's how this whole thing kind of started. So if you want to get a good render, you can check that out. You can also just use normal Cinema 4D. I'm not going to show you how to render the tub here, the GFuel tub, because actually Triumph has a tutorial already on it. Now the only difference is his is a little older. You can see 2016, so the actual tub is an older style with the label just going around the main body section. Now the new labels go up to the lid. So that's the only difference. If you want to check that out and learn how to do that yourself, feel free, but I'll also include a download link to the tub and the label, so you don't have to worry about those two things. Then the next thing you want to download is this Splash 3D model, and you can get it on TurboSquid for free. I was gonna do my own liquid, but it was taking forever. I couldn't get it how I wanted, and this was just a free download and looks pretty sweet. And then I also had strawberry and kiwi models. Now the strawberry one I actually started making myself, then my Cinema 4D crashed and I lost the progress on it, so I used this little tutorial from Daniel, and he actually has a download to the strawberry that you can download. And then I modeled a kiwi, which was just half a sphere, and textured it, and I'll give that to you guys for free as well with the tub. Now the full scene here, like you see it, is going to be available to download for my Patreon members, so you guys can get the full Cinema 4D file, one with the Corona render and one without it, and then also the Photoshop file. Also, my Patreon members, $5 tier or above, will get a couple other models that include a can and a shaker, which is right here. So if you guys are a part of the Patreon, check that out. Otherwise, I think we are good to go and get started. So we have the liquid, the tub, the kiwi, and the strawberry all in here. You should have the materials for the kiwi, the tub, and the strawberry. However, you might not have the, you won't have the liquid material I'm using. So I'm actually using a Corona material, and if you have Corona, you'll have to go to Corona New Material. If you're using just standard Cinema 4D or a different renderer, just try to recreate this material best you can. You can see I have a few things checked here. So first is diffuse, and we just have a light pink selected. So you guys can copy this down the best you can. It doesn't have to be precise because I changed this up quite a bit in Photoshop anyway, but it just has to be fairly translucent and see-through. So this is the pink I selected, and then we have translucency checked, set at 50%, reflection 10%, refraction 50%, opacity 75%. And that's the material, and then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that a while. Double click on the duplicated one. I actually could have kept that window open. I did not need to close it, but we're going to move this over into the green to be a light green. So now we have our green and pink liquid materials. I just had to fix the GFuel label material real quick, so now we can see that. And I'm going to move the strawberry over, so now we can see everything. Now to preview this, you can use your normal render view, or you can go to Corona interactive render. And here you can play around with different settings and things, like our light mix here, which is our different lights. You can play with how strong they are, etc, etc. I'm going to go ahead and close this because for tutorial purposes, I'm going to try to keep this moving. I'm going to put all the lights in a group, selecting them all, right-clicking, grouping objects, double-clicking, and calling it lights. Bring it down to the bottom, and now let's set up our scene. So I'm going to go to the tub, and I actually included 2 duplicates of the tub on either side of the main one. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this tub, and just going to hide it and bring it down to the bottom, so I will use that later on. Now this main tub, I want to be open, but you'll notice the label goes above the lid, extends here. So on this label, I'm going to go ahead, get this selection tool and get the polygons, and you can see I have the rim area already selected. I'm going to press V on the keyboard and go to loop selection. And you'll notice if I just click on a line here, it'll select that. And I can do the same thing with the top. And then the next one below, like that. And hit delete. And there we go. Now I'm going to get the move tool and go back to the model. And I'm going to set this up in a tilted fashion. So let me select the whole group tub and rotate it. So something like that. And then if we get the lid, we can go ahead and do a similar thing, rotate it maybe down, and then bring it up, maybe bring it forward a little bit and over. There we go. So I'm happy with that. If you find a spot where you want to render it, so say I like this right here, this is the angle I want, I can go to Corona and get the camera, and this will be a save spot. If it's white, that means you're in the camera. When it's black, it means you're out of the camera. So when it's black, you can still move around and go back whenever you want. It's just like a Cinema 4D camera that you might have used before. Now let's set up our scene. So I'm going to get our liquid model here. I'm going to align it the best I can. Now, this took me a long time to get it how I wanted, and I had to move the tub and everything to get it right. So this may take a bit of mucking about to get right. So I know I want it to be kind of back here. Okay, so that's exactly where I want it. So your model will probably be aligned in some other way, like this. It will probably be like that. So you just want to rotate it and align it the best way you can, however you want. You don't have to do it exactly like mine. You can mess around and find the best way for you. So mine's just kind of slightly over, and I want this to be so I think that is pretty good for that setup. Now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my liquid here. And on this one, I'm going to bring the camera down as well. And on this one, I'm going to add the green texture, select the green liquid, and bring it backwards and down. And then I'm going to get the rotation tool and rotate it. Move it around a little bit. Maybe rotate it like that. And just mess around until you find a spot you think it looks good. So I think mine right there is pretty solid. I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty similar to what I originally did, I think. Now you might be thinking, do we keep adding more liquid? And we will in Photoshop, and actually how I went about rendering it is I rendered a full scene like this with the fruit that we're about to add, and then I rendered one with just liquid, and then I zoomed in and rendered one with just liquid, and then I did one with just fruit. That way we can add more fruit elements in and more liquid elements in, however much we want. But speaking of the fruit, let's go ahead and add that. The first one we're going to do is the strawberry, so I'm going to open this strawberry object and bring it to the top since we're working with it. I'm going to go to MoGraph Cloner and add the strawberry into it. And you'll see our cloner will duplicate that strawberry a couple times there, but we want to play around with some of these settings and spread it out throughout our project here. And I'm actually going to go to Mode Honeycomb Array. And I'm going to bump the count down to about 7 and 7. You could do 6 too, it all depends. You can kind of mess around with what you'd like. You can see all the strawberries are the same and spread out, which we don't want. We want some variety in there. So while you have the cloner selected, go to MoGraph, Effector, and Random. And on this random effector, we're going to go to Parameter, and we're going to have Position, Scale, and Rotation checked. So I have some settings written down for this already, and we're going to see how they work. So the first one is on position 900. The second one is like about -380. And the last one is 12221. Now you could play around with this too, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. But then on rotation we have -77, -86, and 21. And then on scale, we want to check uniform scale and bump that to 0.68. And that's pretty close. You'll notice we have this big strawberry here, so we're going to want to try to get rid of that here. But let's select the cloner and rotate it back a little bit and grab the move tool and bring it back. And now we're starting to see a little better size for these. And they're pretty clumped over here, which is fine. You can go ahead to the cloner and bump down the count. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it because I believe these ones will be cropped out anyway, and it won't be a big deal. Now, what we want to do is select both the cloner and the random, Command C, Command V. This might take a second. Select the strawberry, delete it, and then go ahead and add our Qehzy model. And make sure you click the stoplight to make it visible. You'll notice it goes to the exact same spots as the strawberries, so we want to change that up. I did that by going to the cloner and bumping down the width to 6. And you could do the height to 6 as well, but I left that at 7. And then if we go to random and parameter and just mess around with these settings, so maybe 450, half that. Maybe go positive 380. Negative Z. And then move it over. Move it over and up. That's not too bad. Now I want a couple more facing the camera. I don't want this side and this back, or this one probably won't be seen, but this one I want to have it face us just a little bit. So oh, not that far. There we go. Now it's facing us a little better. And that's a pretty good random display of fruit. You can mess around with this even more and get it a lot better, but I'm happy with this. And then I had a couple more tubs like I mentioned, so if we go back to the first tub, get that guy, bring the size down a little bit, duplicate them once, bring both of them up, and I had one off to the left here. Let me bring it back. Rotate it. And let's get the second one and put it off to the right. And there's our scene. Let's go back to our camera. You can see, voila, there we are. So guys, that's basically the render. Now, if you have any problems with Corona and rendering out, let me know in the comments. I'll try to help you out. I would give you guys a test preview right now, but this render takes a good amount of time, and I'm going to be trying to move forward with this tutorial. So let's go ahead and jump over into Photoshop. So now we're in Photoshop. Let's go ahead and create a new document. And I'm going to have this as just a normal letterhead size, 8.5 by 11. Create. And you'll see I have multiple renders. So here is one that was just all fruit. This one was the liquid where it was in the render. And this is it zoomed in. Here is the full render. So let's go ahead and add those four into our document. So there's fruit, liquid, big liquid, render. I'm going to hide them all but the main render for now, and on the background I'm going to press Command I to make it black. That's something you could have done when you created the document, but I forgot a little bit. Now let's select the render, Command T, hold Alt, and increase the size. So it's somewhere about there. Now we can always make it a little bigger later on. And I'm going to actually press Command T and rotate it to be a little more straight up. And that should be good. I'm going to create a new layer, press Alt and click on that layer to make it a clipping mask. And I'm going to get the brush tool and a soft brush, like so. And then I'm going to get a green and a blue color selected in my colors there. So let's click this green and go for a more saturated one. And then let's click the pink, go for a more saturated one. And we have the green selected right now, so let's go ahead and color over the green liquid areas. Now you can use the bracket keys to change the brush size as you go to get in all the areas. Once you get as much as you can, go ahead and set that to overlay and bump the opacity down to about 50. Now you might notice some spots you miss and you can always just go over them. Okay, apparently I can't, oh, I have that selected. I was like, I can't make my, it's still doing it, come on. There we go. What are you doing? There we go. Make it smaller, okay. Finally, that took a lot. There we go. I'm gonna get the eraser tool and just clean up this edge. You can also go ahead and if you select the render and create a new layer, it'll make a clipping mask automatically. Let me get rid of that dock. And you can go ahead and do the same thing but with white. So I'm actually gonna press Command C and copy this hex code for the pink, select white, and go ahead and just brighten up some areas that might be a little too dark. So down here, maybe around here a little bit. And just like a little bit like that, and set that to overlay, decrease the opacity a bit, maybe like 30, and just to brighten some stuff up. We can brighten that a little more later on. By the way, if you start hearing background noise, it's just the fan of my computer. Might start getting that at this stage. But anyway, the next step is to go with some of the fruit background. So let's get the fruit render, and I'm going to press Command T and increase the size of that to fill up the whole document like so. Hit enter, and I'm going to create a new layer, alt click to make it a clipping mask. Keep that white selected, get the brush tool, and you can go ahead and hide the main render for now and just get some of the dark spots here and cover them with white because we're going to add a little bit of an overlay to brighten them up. And we're just going to set that layer to soft light. Bring back the renderer, and there we go. You can see these strawberries are kind of repetitive too at the top. So if we just go ahead and select the fruits render and get a layer mask, we can go ahead and hide that one. And you can do that to any other spots where they're kind of repetitive, like down here. That should be pretty good though. Now we're going to get the liquid render 2. In my case, this is the zoomed in liquid. So we're going to get that visible, press Command T, and again, press Alt and make it big. Fill up the whole document like so, press enter. And the same thing we did with the previous render, we're going to create a new layer, get pink and green, and just go over those areas as an overlay. And go ahead and set it to overlay once you're done. And now you can start to see some of this color we're getting. But we're going to bump this down to 50% opacity like the other one. Now select both the render and overlay of that one. Press Command J to duplicate, and then press Command E to merge it. And go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And let's bump it up to about 12. Click OK. And set that layer to screen. And we'll leave that at 100% opacity. And then right below that, we want to move our render liquid 1. So this is our normal liquid render. Press Command T on that, Alt, and increase the size a little bit, and hit enter. Now there's a few things you can do with this one. You can leave it as is without the overlay, which is what I did. So you can see it kind of breaks up the brightness with just like a clearer liquid because it's like a lighter color. Or you can add the same overlay effect that we did previously. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is. You can even do that and bump down the opacity a little bit. It just kind of adds a little texture to the already existing liquid, but it does increase the busyness of it, which I ended up covering up later on. But I'm just going to hide it for now. I'm not going to actually use it. Now another thing we could do here is duplicate the fruits and add a radial blur to give it some motion. But one of the designers on my Twitter actually commented that it kind of didn't really work in my project. And I trust his expert opinion, so I'm going to say we don't add any blur to the fruit and we just leave it alone. It's kind of okay with the blur. If you want to do it, it's just filter, blur, radial blur on a duplicated version of the fruit, and then you just erase some bits of it. But I'm going to go ahead and skip it. I am actually going to erase a couple fruits down here though. There we go. Now I did these in parts, so this is part 1, and the last part of part 1 is actually adding a solid color to the background, which we're going to do a dark pink. So select the pink and just go down into the darker versions, and right there, click OK, and boom, there we go. So this is part 1. I'm going to put this all in a group and call this part 1. And on this part 1 group, we're going to go down and get another solid color, and this time we're going to make it white and set it to overlay, and press Alt and just click on the part if that's easier, and bump it down to about 16%. Hit enter. And one final thing in part 1 is to create a new layer. Get the brush tool and get the pink. Make sure your brush is soft, and we're going to add some light in here. So let's make a big soft brush and click right in the middle top like so. Press Command U and bring up the lightness so it's like a lightish pink like that. Click OK and set it to screen and knock down the opacity. 25 works, and that's just our lighting. You can actually add a blur to that as well. Maybe press Command T, press Shift, and bring it down a little bit. And there we go. There is part 1. Now for part 2, we're going to go ahead and select both the color fill and part 1 group and press Command J and Command E to merge. So now we're working with this, and we're going to create a new group and call it part 2. And we're going to call this layer base. Now we're going to duplicate that base layer and go to Filter, Blur, Radial Blur, and this is actually how you do the blur for the fruit, but we're just going to do it normally here and click OK. Now you can see that's like really extreme. So we're going to go to the layer mask and press Command I. So now none of this is visible, but we're going to get the brush tool and some white, and we're going to make this visible in some areas that are just like a little too busy. So like down here, I like to use it, and maybe up here a bit. Now that might be a little too much, but in here as well. And anywhere there's like spots on the darker color, so like this has a bunch of like little liquid drips on top of the big one, so I'm trying to cover those up the best I can so it doesn't look too busy. There we go, that's pretty good. I'm also going to go ahead and create a new layer here, get the brush tool and increase the size. I'm going to leave it as pink right now, but I'm going to change that after I apply it. So I'm going to get a big brush like this, hold shift and start from the left and go right across the right, and then press Command U and go all the way to black, and then set that to overlay and about 5%. So that just darkens up the bottom a little bit. Now if there's still dark spots in your render here, we can go ahead and fill those in with more white overlays. So I'm going to decrease the size of my brush and just go over some of these darker spots. You'll notice it's pink right now, but we're going to press Command U, make it white, set it to overlay, and decrease the opacity a little bit so it's not too annoying. That's pretty good. Now I added some textured-ish spots with a paintbrush brush. So I'm going to go to my brushes, and there's a bunch of these paintbrush brushes for Photoshop available. I think I scrolled past it. Yeah, so they're like this. So it's like a paintbrush effect, and I'm going to go ahead and click to add this pink one, create a new layer, get a different one, and use green, and just add these in a couple places. I'm going to set both these layers to 50%, and the green, I'm going to go filter, liquify, get this twirl one and just twirl it a little bit to give it some interest. Do the same thing with the pink one. And then align them somewhere that you think is maybe a little too busy or could use some color. So I put this one like right here in the middle here and rotated it slightly like that. And then the pink one I put on the edge. You might be wondering why I didn't use just black and white for the colors here, and that's because of that right there, adding those colored brushes. But also, I'm going to go ahead and add a gradient map down here, and I want that to be the green and pink that we're using. And actually we want it to be pink to green, so let's reverse it and set that to overlay. And then bump that down to 25. And that gives us a better feel for the color. So if I hide that, you can see it just feels more strawberry kiwi now. I don't know, that's just a personal thing, I guess. Now let's correct this a little further. So let's go down here and get levels. And you can see these eyedroppers over here to the side. So we're gonna get the white eyedropper and click the brightest point here, which will probably be some of this light reflecting like there. And then the black eyedropper, the top one, we're going to get and click the label here, and that kind of gives us a little nicer color correction. Now it's starting to really come together now with the color popping and looking really nice. Now we're going to close that group and Command J and merge it, and press Command G to group it, and this is going to be part 3. You can call this one base. And now I'm going to actually zoom in a little further. So I'm going to go over to the cropping tool here, click that, and then hit enter and enter. So that'll crop our base layer here to the size of the document. And then I'm going to press Command T. I'm going to Command minus to zoom out, press Alt and zoom in. And here you could also rotate this around to however you'd want it to be. I'm going to keep it straight up and hit enter. Now this might take away some of the quality, so you'll have to bump down the canvas size, which you can definitely do. You can also just crop it to be smaller. That's another option. I just did it this way because I lowered the size then anyway. This actually might be a little too zoomed in. Let's zoom out slightly. There we go. Now I'm going to duplicate that and go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And I'm going to go to this last tab and go to Lift Shadows. Click OK. And I just kind of like how that looks. Now at this point you could go ahead and add logos and things like that, which is what I did on the final one. And hopefully if you're doing this project you know how to add logos to a document and I don't have to show you that. So we're just going to move on to the next step, which is duplicating part 3 and merging it for part 4, which is I didn't include it in the parts because it's just kind of like a cleanup, I guess. But we're gonna do that same cropping technique we just did and hit enter twice, and then duplicate this, and on the top one press Command T, Alt, and bring down the size just a little bit, hit enter, and then create a new layer, press Command Delete to fill it with pink or green. You could also do black or whatever. And then on that bottom layer, or the middle layer with the 3 we're working in, we're going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and put it at about 6. Hit enter. I'm going to zoom out, press Command T, Alt, and increase the size a little bit. Hit enter, and there we go. There is our final look. Obviously, you'll probably want to spend a little more time on this, getting things a little more precise and looking good. I noticed some of these gaps might not look the best, and this is slightly darker than the one I did previously because I added a little more white overlays in the dark areas. You could also add a vibrance or a hue and saturation or something, bump that up to fill out the color or what have you. But anyways guys, that is the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and if you did, please leave a like. Subscribe for more tutorials like this. Also, be sure to check out my Skillshare. I actually have a new class coming this week that features these posters, or I'll just recreate one of them, but you can find out how to create these posters, as well as 3 other classes that I have there now. If you use my link in the description, you get 2 months free, and if you just cancel before that, you never have to pay, so it's really a great deal, so check it out. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon. They get videos early, they get all the stuff from these videos. Like I mentioned earlier, they get to download all this stuff as long as they're a $5 tier member or higher. And the higher you go, you get a lot of good stuff, including the Skillshare classes as well. So there's a lot of good stuff there. They get everything in my store. Also, check out my store. You can get my Lightroom and a bunch of other good stuff there. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. Follow me on Twitter at Qehzy, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.